Greetings, my dear friends, and welcome back to our channel. Captain Arthur Hastings here, your humble narrator, eager to share another extraordinary tale from the files of my incomparable friend Hercule Poirot. Today, we delve into a perplexing enigma, a case that tested even Poirot's formidable little grey cells and led us through the labyrinthine alleys and grand avenues of London, revealing the hidden lives beneath the city's bustling veneer. Prepare yourselves for a journey into mystery, intrigue, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Do remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our thrilling adventures. Now, let's begin with the first chapter of the case of the Rusty Pliers. Chapter 1. The Antiquarian's Last Hour. The morning mist still clung to the windows of our elegant London flat, a pearly shroud over the awakening city. I was enjoying my customary kippers, perusing the Daily Mail, when Poirot, ever precise, emerged from his bedroom. His green velvet smoking jacket was impeccably tailored, his mustache perfectly waxed, his expression one of serene contentment. He arranged his toast, cut with mathematical exactitude, upon his plate. "A good day, Hastings," he announced, sipping his hot chocolate with a delicate clink of china. "The world is orderly, the news, alas, predictably chaotic. It is a morning for quiet contemplation, perhaps a small deduction from the placement of your marmalade spoon." I chuckled, accustomed to his playful pronouncements. "Indeed, Poirot, though I confess my mind is on the racing form more than the metaphysics of cutlery." Our pleasant breakfast was soon interrupted by a sharp, insistent rap at the door. Our housekeeper, Mrs. Todd, a woman of formidable efficiency, soon ushered in a nervous young constable. He twisted his helmet in his hands, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Mr. Poirot, sir," he stammered, addressing my friend with profound respect. "Inspector Japp sends his compliments and requests your immediate assistance. There's been an incident, sir, in Bloomsbury." Poirot raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "An incident, mon ami? Do enlighten us. Is it a matter for the humble constabulary, or does it require the touch, dare I say, of a more refined intellect?" "It's Mr. Elias Thorne, sir," the constable explained, relief washing over his face at Poirot's calm demeanor. "Found him this morning. His housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, discovered him. Lifeless, sir, in his study. No signs of struggle, but, well, it's peculiar, sir. Very peculiar." Within minutes, Poirot was donning his immaculate overcoat, a beaver hat perched squarely on his head. I naturally followed, pulling on my own coat with a sense of rising anticipation. There was nothing like a good mystery to banish the morning ennui. The Bloomsbury townhouse, where Elias Thorne had resided, was a picture of respectable, if slightly faded, gentility. Its red brick facade was grimy with years of London soot, the windows tall and narrow, overlooking a quiet, tree-lined square. A few curious neighbours peered from behind lace curtains as we stepped out of the hired hansom cab. Inspector Japp met us at the door, his bluff, hearty manner somewhat subdued by the gravity of the situation. "Poirot, my old friend, good you could make it," he grunted, shaking my friend's hand vigorously. "Another head-scratcher, I'm afraid. Come in, come in." The interior of the house was a warren of dim passages and high-ceilinged rooms, all smelling faintly of dust, old books, and something vaguely metallic. Mrs. Gable, a gaunt woman with wispy grey hair, sat weeping into a handkerchief in the small parlour, attended by a sympathetic policewoman. "A good woman, Mrs. Gable," Japp murmured. "Worked for Mr. Thorne for 20 years, completely distraught." Poirot merely nodded, his eyes already scanning the hallway, noting the worn pattern of the runner, the faint scuff marks near the umbrella stand. He moved with a quiet purpose, his gaze missing nothing. "The study, Japp, if you please," Poirot requested, his voice low. We were led to a room at the back of the house, overlooking a small, neglected garden. It was a scholar's sanctuary, lined from floor to ceiling with overflowing bookshelves. The air was heavy with the scent of aged paper and pipe tobacco, even though no pipe was evident. A large oak desk, cluttered with scientific instruments, magnifying glasses, and various intricate clockwork mechanisms, dominated the center of the room. Elias Thorne himself was found slumped in a high-backed leather armchair next to the fireplace. He was a man of perhaps 60, with a sparse grey beard and spectacles still perched on his nose. His expression was peaceful, almost serene, as if he had simply fallen asleep. The non-graphic detail of his condition was truly unsettling. He looked merely collapsed under mysterious circumstances. His body still, no signs of struggle, no obvious injury, no disarray around him. He simply was gone. Doctors already had a look, Japp said in a hushed tone. No external injuries, no obvious cause of death. He just expired. Could be natural causes, but Mrs. Gable swears he was in robust health for his age. And there's this. Japp gestured towards the desk. Poirot's eyes had already settled on the spot. Amongst the clutter, nestled beside a stack of old scientific journals, was a small, intricately carved wooden box. It was open, its delicate lid thrown back, revealing an empty, velvet-lined interior. It looked like it should contain something precious, but it was conspicuously bare. And then I saw it too. Resting haphazardly on the edge of the open box, tarnished and dull against the polished wood, lay a pair of old, rusty pliers. They looked out of place amongst the precision tools, crude and forgotten. Poirot leaned in, his gaze intense, sweeping over the scene like a finely tuned instrument. He did not touch anything, merely observed. He noted the precise angle of Thorne's head, the way his fingers rested on the armrest, the faint ring left by a teacup on a nearby table, still half filled. He then turned his attention to the empty box and finally to the pliers. "Interesting, n'est-ce pas?" Poirot murmured, his voice barely a whisper. An antiquarian, surrounded by precision and order, yet here a tool so rough, and an empty box, designed for secrets, now open and revealing nothing. "The little grey cells are already stirring, mon ami. We have here a canvas on which the truth will, with time and diligence, be painted." I felt a shiver of excitement. The game was afoot, and Poirot, with his usual understated brilliance, had already found the first, most intriguing brush-stroke. Chapter 2. Of Clocks and Curious Visitors. The initial shock of Elias Thorne's demise hung heavy in the air, a silent question mark over the Bloomsbury townhouse. Poirot, having completed his initial survey of the study, moved with quiet determination through the rest of the house. I followed, trying to absorb every detail as he did, though my observations were invariably far less incisive. We found Mrs. Gable in the kitchen, a stark contrast to the scholarly clutter of the study. It was a neat, rather old-fashioned room, smelling of boiled cabbage and carbolic soap. She was attempting to make tea, her hands trembling so much the kettle rattled against the hob. "Mrs. Gable," Poirot began gently, his voice kind, "I am Hercule Poirot. My sincerest condolences on your loss. Can you tell us, if you please, what happened this morning?" The housekeeper dabbed her eyes with her apron. "Oh, Mr. Poirot, it was dreadful. I came in as usual, just after 8. Mr. Thorne was a creature of habit, you see, always had his breakfast at 9, punctual to the minute. I'd bring him his tea and toast in the study, but this morning—" He didn't answer my knock. The door was ajar, just a crack, and when I looked in, he was just sitting there, so still, like a statue. I just knew. She choked back a sob. "Did you notice anything unusual yesterday, Mrs. Gable?" Poirot pressed, his eyes fixed on her. "Any visitors? Deliveries? Anything out of the ordinary in Mr. Thorne's routine?" She wrung her hands. "Well, there was that young man. Yesterday afternoon around 3. A shifty-looking sort, if you ask me. Had a soft hat pulled low. Said he was here to discuss some old clock parts Mr. Thorne was interested in. Mr. Thorne kept him in the hall for a bit, then they went into the study. Stayed for an hour or so. I heard raised voices once or twice, but Mr. Thorne was a passionate man about his work, so I didn't think much of it. Can you describe him? Thin face, pale eyes. Rather twitchy, I'd say. No manners. Didn't look like any of Mr. Thorne's usual scholarly visitors. Poirot nodded, filing away the description. And the rusty pliers, Mrs. Gable. Did you recognize them? She frowned. Oh, those old things. They belonged to Mr. Thorne's grandfather, I believe. He kept them for sentimental reasons. Used to be in that old wooden box on his desk, I think. Never saw him use them, mind. Too crude for his delicate work. Ah, the plot thickens, I thought. So the pliers were inside the box and belonged to his grandfather. This explained their presence, but raised new questions about why they were now outside and the box empty. Our next stop, guided by Jap, was less somber. It was a bustling establishment in Covent Garden, a small independent clock repair shop called the Timekeeper's Nook, tucked between a florist and a greengrocer. The air inside was thick with the scent of oil and metal, the rhythmic tick-tock of countless clocks providing a hypnotic soundtrack. The proprietor, a wizened old man named Mr. Finch, no relation to the shifty visitor, I hoped, though the name was similar, looked up from a delicate pocket watch with a magnifying glass screwed into his eye. He had a white apron dusted with metal filings and an air of quiet concentration. Mr. Thorne? Mr. Finch echoed, removing the magnifier. Aye, a good customer. Knew his horology, he did. Picked up a parcel just yesterday, a rather rare set of components for a Breguet clock. A very early one, 18th century, if I'm not mistaken. He was very excited about it. And did he mention why he needed these specific parts? Poirot inquired, his eyes sweeping over the intricate mechanisms displayed behind glass. Said he was trying to restore a family heirloom, Mr. Finch replied, polishing his spectacles. A grand affair, apparently. Full of secret mechanisms, he hinted. Always talking about hidden legacies and unraveling the past. A bit of an eccentric, bless him. Did you notice anything else about him yesterday? Poirot asked, his voice deceptively casual. Any unusual state of mind, or perhaps any other purchases or inquiries? He seemed elated, Mr. Finch mused, like he was on the verge of a great discovery, said he'd finally found the last piece of the puzzle. Mentioned he was meeting someone to discuss the final stages of his research. Someone he described as a young fellow with a keen interest in historical engineering. Didn't give a name, though. A young fellow. Could it be the shifty visitor Mrs. Gable mentioned? The timeline certainly seemed to fit. The clock parts were purchased, a meeting was set, and then Elias Thorne was found lifeless. As we left the shop, the vibrant chaos of Covent Garden, the shouts of vendors, the laughter of children, the bright colors of fruit and flowers, seemed a stark contrast to the quiet tragedy we had left behind. So, Hastings, Poirot declared, hailing another cab. We have several threads, a secret family heirloom, a hidden legacy, a mysterious young man, and a set of antique clock parts, and always the empty wooden box and the rusty pliers. It speaks to a story, does it not? A tale of discovery, perhaps, and its fatal interruption. But who was the young man? I mused aloud. And what does this legacy entail? Precisely, mon ami, Poirot replied, a twinkle in his eye. These are the questions the little grey cells are already formulating. The game, as they say, has truly begun. Chapter 3. The Cipher of the Cogwheel. The following morning found Poirot in a state of bustling activity, a rare sight for a man who championed stillness. He declared that fresh air and a change of scenery would aid our thinking. Thus, we found ourselves amidst the swirling chaos of Charing Cross Station, a grand cathedral of iron and glass, where the rhythmic thud of steam engines mingled with the shouts of porters and the babble of departing passengers. The air was thick with the smell of coal smoke and damp earth, a raw, vital pulse of London life. Poirot, usually so averse to crowds, moved with surprising agility, his gaze sharp, taking in the myriad faces, the luggage tags, the departure boards. He was looking for something, though he kept his purpose veiled. "It is often in the hurly-burly of life, Hastings," he explained, "that the small significant details are overlooked. A hurried conversation, a dropped ticket, a fleeting expression. Here, amidst the rush, truths are often glimpsed, if one knows where to look." After nearly an hour of this peculiar perambulation, Poirot stopped abruptly beside a newsstand, purchasing a copy of the Illustrated London News. He did not read it, however, but meticulously folded it, his eyes constantly darting. I was about to inquire when he suddenly spotted a small, dark-haired man in a threadbare suit who was nervously pacing near the third-class carriages. The man had a battered leather satchel clutched tightly in his hand. "Uh-huh," Poirot murmured, a faint smile touching his lips. "Our Mr. Silas Crofton, I believe, the antiquarian whom Mr. Thorne had dealings with regarding the provenance of his clock parts." We approached Crofton, who jumped nervously at Poirot's polite greeting. He had shifty eyes and a perpetually worried expression, clearly unaccustomed to such direct attention. "Mr. Crofton," Poirot began smoothly, "we are investigating the unfortunate demise of Mr. Elias Thorne. We understand you supplied him with some rather rare clock components recently." Crofton wrung his hands. "Aye, that's right. An exceptional find, those Breguet parts. Very rare. Mr. Thorne was insistent. Said they were the last pieces for his grandfather's magnum opus. Some grand secret clockwork marvel, he called it. He was obsessed." "Obsessed with what, precisely?" I asked, trying to draw him out. "With the legacy," he kept saying. His grandfather, Professor Alistair Vance, a brilliant inventor, but a bit unhinged, disappeared years ago after some scandal. Thorne believed his grandfather had hidden a great secret within his final invention, a clock that was more than just a time-telling device. A key, he called it. Thorne believed these parts, once assembled, would unlock the full potential of this key. "And did Mr. Thorne mention this key in any greater detail?" Poirot pressed. "Its purpose, its nature?" Crofton shook his head. "Only that it would change everything. He was very secretive, but he did say he had almost finished assembling it, that the Breguet components were the final, crucial pieces. He was to meet someone, a young man, to review his findings. Said the young man had connections to the Vance family estate. Someone with an interest in the grandfather's work. A connection to the Vance family estate. This was a new and significant detail, linking the shifty young man to the family's past. Poirot thanked Crofton and, after a brisk walk and another cab ride, led me to a decidedly different part of the city, the grimy cobbled docks of Wapping. The air here was sharp with the tang of salt and tar, the mournful cry of gulls overhead. We navigated a labyrinth of dark alleys and towering warehouses, their brickwork scarred by age and weather. The Thames, a grey, shifting presence, flowed silently nearby. "Where are we going, Poirot?" I asked, feeling a chill despite the mild day. "This is a far cry from Bloomsbury." "Indeed, Hastings, a far cry. But sometimes one must delve into the forgotten corners to unearth forgotten truths." We stopped before a particularly dilapidated warehouse, its windows boarded up, a rusty iron gate barring entry. Poirot, however, seemed to know exactly where he was going. He led us around the back to a small, unassuming side door, which, surprisingly, was unlocked. The interior was vast and cavernous, filled with the ghosts of forgotten goods. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light filtering through gaps in the roof. Old crates were stacked high, their labels faded. In the center of the room, under a single, bare electric bulb hanging from the ceiling, stood a workbench, and upon that workbench, partially disassembled, was a magnificent, ornate grandfather clock. It was an exquisite piece of craftsmanship, inlaid with intricate woods and brass, but it also had an unusual, almost industrial quality to its design. It looked less like a simple timepiece and more like a complex scientific instrument. Poirot approached the clock with reverence. He ran a gloved finger over a section of its casing, then meticulously examined the disassembled gears and springs laid out on a velvet cloth. His eyes glowed with focused intensity. He picked up one of the newly installed Breguet components, a small, beautifully crafted cog wheel. "The final piece, Hastings," he murmured, turning it over in his fingers. "And see here." He pointed to a tiny, almost invisible engraving on the cogwheel's surface. It was a sequence of numbers and letters, so small it was barely discernible without a magnifying glass. "A cipher, perhaps?" I ventured, peering closer. "Or a lock, mon ami," Poirot corrected, his eyes alight. "A lock within a lock." Mr. Thorne was close, very close, and someone wished to ensure he never opened that final door. He carefully removed the cogwheel. Behind it, nestled within the clock's inner workings, was a small, tightly folded piece of paper. With utmost care, Poirot extracted it. He unfolded it gently. It contained a drawing, a schematic of a complex mechanism, and beneath it, a single handwritten phrase. "The true legacy lies not in time, but in the cessation of its passage. Seek the dormant spark." I stared at it, utterly bewildered. The cessation of its passage? What on earth does that mean? Poirot's expression was grave. "It means, Hastings, that Professor Vance's key was far more than a mere clock, and that the stakes in this game are infinitely higher than we first imagined. The rusty pliers, the empty box, the secret phrase. It all weaves a tapestry of a hidden truth. A truth someone was willing to kill to protect." Chapter 4. The Professor's Folly. The cryptic message from the grandfather clock sent a shiver down my spine. The true legacy lies not in time, but in the cessation of its passage. Seek the dormant spark. Poirot folded the paper meticulously and tucked it into his wallet, his thoughts already racing ahead. We left the echoing silence of the Wapping warehouse, the grey light of the docks now receding as the afternoon wore on. "Poirot," I began, as we rattled along in a cab towards a new destination, "this Professor Vance, Silas Crofton said he was brilliant but unhinged and involved in some scandal. Do you think this legacy is something dangerous?" "It is a distinct possibility, mon ami," Poirot replied, gazing thoughtfully out the window at the passing London streetscape. "The nature of genius, when untethered by convention, can be a double-edged sword. A device that halts time or merely simulates its cessation could have profound implications. We must delve into Professor Vance's past, and I know just the place to begin. Our journey led us to the hallowed halls of the British Museum, a grand edifice of classical architecture where the past was carefully preserved. Poirot, however, did not lead us to the Elgin marbles or the Rosetta Stone. Instead, we navigated through hushed corridors filled with dusty display cases, eventually reaching a quiet, secluded reading room dedicated to scientific and historical archives. The air was cool and still, permeated by the scent of old paper and leather-bound tomes. Scattered academics pored over ancient texts, their whispers barely disturbing the profound silence. Poirot, with his characteristic efficiency, presented a letter of introduction, and soon a helpful, bespectacled librarian, Miss Eliza Finch. Another Finch. The name seemed to follow us, though she bore no resemblance to the shifty visitor. directed us to the records of the Royal Society of Engineering from the late 19th century. We spent a laborious hour sifting through faded journals and bound volumes, Hastings acting as Poirot's extra pair of hands. The search was painstaking, but eventually Poirot let out a soft exclamation of triumph. Here we are, Hastings. Professor Alistair Vance, born 1835, died 1898. A prodigy, indeed. Early work on automatons, then on advanced chronometry. And here, he tapped a finger on a yellowed article from 1897. A formal expulsion from the Society. Accusations of unethical experimentation and dangerous theories concerning temporal mechanics. His magnum opus, the ethyl-red chronometer, was deemed a threat to public safety and its plans ordered destroyed. The ethyl-red chronometer, I exclaimed, the name resonating with a sense of historical mystery. So, that was the key Elias Thorne was trying to restore. But what was it meant to do? Poirot read further, his brow furrowed. The article suggests it was not merely a time-telling device, but a mechanism designed to stabilize temporal flux, effectively creating a localized field where time could be manipulated, perhaps even halted for a brief period. The Society considered it highly unstable, fearing catastrophic repercussions if misused. There was a major dispute with a fellow engineer, Sir Graham Beaumont, who championed its suppression. Sir Graham Beaumont, I repeated. Any relation to Julian Beaumont, the young man we believe met with Mr. Thorne? It is a logical deduction, is it not? Poirot observed, a glint in his eye. The family connection suggests a continuity of interest, perhaps even a dispute spanning generations. A hidden legacy, indeed. We copied the relevant documents and, with a courteous nod to Miss Finch, departed the venerable institution. The setting sun cast long shadows over the museum forecourt, painting the classical architecture in hues of orange and gold. The noise of London traffic seemed distant, muted by the weight of history. Our next destination, following Poirot's subtle directions, was to an entirely different kind of urban landscape. We traveled to what had once been a grand private estate in Kensington, now largely subdivided, but still boasting a vast, overgrown garden, accessible to the public only by a crumbling, little-known gate. The air here was damp and earthy, filled with the scent of wild roses and decaying leaves. It was a place where nature had reclaimed its own, a testament to faded glory. We walked along winding, neglected paths under the arching branches of ancient trees. The light here was dappled and green, creating an atmosphere of secluded mystery. Poirot stopped before a particularly gnarled oak, its bark resembling an old man's weathered face. Professor Vance's original estate, Hastings, Poirot informed me, gesturing around the wild expanse. Before it was parceled out, it is said he had a hidden laboratory somewhere on these grounds, and according to these records, he buried a time capsule here, containing some of his research, convinced future generations would appreciate his genius. We searched for a time, pushing through brambles and tall weeds, but found nothing. The garden, however, yielded an unexpected encounter. As we were about to give up, a slender figure emerged from a thicket of rhododendrons. It was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, dressed in a simple, artistic gown, her dark hair tied back with a silk ribbon. She carried a sketch pad and a small satchel, her hands stained with paint. She had a striking, intelligent face, though her eyes held a hint of sadness. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Are you enjoying the garden? It's a favorite haunt of mine for inspiration." Poirot bowed slightly. "Mademoiselle, we are Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings." "And you are?" "Eleanor Vance," she replied, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "A distant cousin of Elias Thorne and a descendant of Professor Alistair Vance. I am an artist, specializing in botanical illustrations. I often come here to sketch." My heart quickened. Another Vance. The connections were multiplying. "Mademoiselle Vance," Poirot said, his eyes keenly observing her. "It is a remarkable coincidence. We are investigating the unfortunate passing of Mr. Elias Thorne." A shadow crossed her face. "Oh, yes. It was truly shocking. Elias was a kind, if somewhat reclusive man. He was nearing a great discovery, he told me. Something about our grandfather's legacy. He had just finished restoring the Ethelred chronometer, he said, and was about to reveal something momentous." "Did he mention to whom he intended to reveal it?" Poirot asked. "Or what this momentous discovery entailed?" Eleanor hesitated. "He only said he was meeting with Julian Beaumont, Sir Graham's grandson, you know, to finally resolve the old family dispute and share the findings. He believed the legacy was not merely scientific, but held a key to understanding our family's past, and perhaps a great injustice." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "An injustice? And the time capsule, mademoiselle? Do you know anything of it?" "Only rumors," she said, looking wistful. "My grandfather was a misunderstood genius. Perhaps the truth is buried somewhere, just like his reputation." As she spoke, I noticed a faint, almost imperceptible smudge of dark grease on her thumb, as if she had recently handled something metallic. Poirot, too, seemed to take note. The threads were not merely multiplying, but tangling into a complex knot, each demanding careful unraveling. Chapter 5. Whispers of Greed and Genius. The twilight deepened over the overgrown Kensington garden, casting long, eerie shadows. Eleanor Vance's unexpected appearance and her connection to both Elias Thorne and Professor Alistair Vance added a compelling new layer to the mystery. The mention of Julian Beaumont, the grandson of Professor Vance's rival, further solidified the idea that the legacy was at the heart of the matter. As we left Eleanor, Poirot's expression was one of profound concentration. "Hastings," he mused, "the plot, as they say, thickens like a good bechamel sauce. We have a deceased antiquarian, an elaborate clock, a controversial invention, and now 2 descendants, each with a vested interest in the past." "And the rusty pliers, Poirot?" I ventured, still perplexed by their significance. "Ah, the pliers," he said, a glint in his eye. "Mrs. Gable says they belong to Professor Vance, kept for sentimental reasons, yet they were found precisely where they should not be, indicating a deliberate act. A tool of finesse, not of brute force. A thought is beginning to form, mon ami, a delicate seedling in the garden of the grey cells." Our next destination was worlds apart from the wild beauty of the garden. Poirot hailed a smart, hansom cab, directing the driver towards the exclusive enclave of Mayfair. Here, the gas lamps glowed with a softer, more refined light, illuminating elegant townhouses with gleaming brass knockers and polished windows. The air itself seemed to carry the faint scent of expensive cigars and fine perfume. We stopped before a magnificent Georgian mansion, its facade adorned with intricate plasterwork. This was the residence of Sir Graham Beaumont's grandson, Julian Beaumont. A liveried butler, stiff and unyielding, answered the door, initially resistant to admitting us without an appointment. However, a flash of Inspector Japp's official card, procured by Poirot, proved surprisingly effective. Julian Beaumont, a handsome man in his early 30s with a casual air of aristocratic charm, greeted us in a vast drawing room. The room was opulent, filled with antique furniture, impressive portraits, and the gentle ticking of several valuable clocks. He offered us sherry, his manners impeccable, though his blue eyes held a touch of wariness. "Gentlemen," he said, indicating plush velvet armchairs, "this is an unexpected honor. I presume this concerns poor Mr. Thorne?" "Indeed, Mr. Beaumont," Poirot replied, his gaze sweeping over the room, noting the family portraits that clearly included Sir Graham. "We understand you were scheduled to meet with Mr. Thorne on the day of his unfortunate demise." Julian sighed, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. Yes, a dreadful business. Elias was a peculiar fellow, but well-meaning. He was convinced he had finally completed his grandfather's Ethelred chronometer. A ridiculous contraption, if you ask me. My grandfather, Sir Graham, always maintained it was a dangerous folly, best left buried. "And what was the nature of your meeting?" Poirot inquired, his voice soft, almost conversational. Julian took a sip of sherry. Elias was quite insistent. He believed the chronometer held a secret, some lost formula, perhaps, or a code. He wanted to show me, as a representative of my grandfather's legacy, that he had finally vindicated Professor Vance. I told him it was all nonsense, a delusion. Our families had a long-standing disagreement, you see. Sir Graham spent his life discrediting Vance's wilder claims. I was hoping to dissuade Elias from publishing any of his findings, to put the whole unfortunate business to rest. "Did Mr. Thorne seem close to achieving his goal?" I asked, recalling Eleanor Vance's comments. Julian chuckled, a dismissive sound. He claimed he had the final piece, some rare clockwork cog, but Elias was always prone to exaggeration. I simply wished to collect any of his research to prevent it from being made public. It could have damaged our family name given the scandals surrounding Vance. "And the rusty pliers, Mr. Beaumont?" Poirot suddenly interjected, his gaze piercing. "Did you ever see them in Mr. Thorne's possession?" Julian's nonchalant demeanor faltered for a fraction of a second. "Pliers? No, I can't say I ever noticed any such thing. Elias was a man of delicate instruments, not crude tools." He recovered quickly, but the slight hesitation was not lost on Poirot. As we left the opulent mansion, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in Julian Beaumont's right hand as he bid us farewell, Poirot remarked, "He has an excellent poker face, our Mr. Beaumont. But even the best poker face can betray a tell, if one observes closely enough." Our next journey took us to a far more modest, but equally intriguing, setting. We traveled to Chelsea, to a winding street of artists' studios, housed in converted mews and dilapidated workshops. The air here was alive with the scent of turpentine and oil paint, the bohemian spirit a stark contrast to Mayfair's rigid aristocracy. We located a charming, if slightly cluttered, studio belonging to Eleanor Vance. Canvases leaned against walls, covered in botanical sketches and intricate miniature paintings. Eleanor herself, dressed in a paint-splattered smock, looked up from an easel, a small paintbrush poised in her hand. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she greeted, a genuine smile this time. "What brings you to my humble atelier?" "Mademoiselle Vance," Poirot said, "we wish to clarify a few points regarding your last conversation with Mr. Thorne. You mentioned he was about to reveal something momentous. Did he specifically state what this legacy truly was?" Eleanor put down her brush, her brow furrowed. "He was vague. He spoke of a dormant spark and how the Ethelred chronometer would awaken it. He believed his grandfather had discovered a form of energy, a power that could be harnessed, something that Sir Graham Beaumont had suppressed, perhaps even stolen to prevent its use. Elias was convinced it was an injustice that needed correcting." "And did he ever show you the rusty pliers?" Poirot asked, repeating his question from Julian. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, yes. Those old things. Elias kept them in the wooden box on his desk, said they were Professor Vance's favorite pair, used for fine adjustments. He treasured them. He told me he'd recently used them to open a very stiff mechanism in the Ethelred chronometer itself, a hidden compartment that only those specific pliers could manipulate without damage." There it was, a direct link between the pliers and the chronometer's secrets. The puzzle pieces were beginning to align. "A hidden compartment," Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. "And the wooden box. It was where he kept the pliers. And it was empty. This is most illuminating, Mademoiselle Vance. Most illuminating indeed." I felt a thrill of excitement. The rusty pliers, once a confusing anomaly, were now clearly a vital, deliberate instrument in the unfolding drama. Their role, it seemed, was far more subtle and far more critical than I had ever imagined. Chapter 6. The Unseen Mechanism. The rain had begun to fall, a fine, persistent drizzle that lent the London streets a glossy sheen and a hushed atmosphere. Poirot and I sought refuge in a renowned establishment in Piccadilly, a grand café adorned with marble and gilt. Its windows steamed against the chill. The clatter of teacups and the murmur of polite conversation provided a comforting backdrop to our contemplation. Poirot carefully arranged 2 sugar lumps beside his espresso. So Hastings, the plot progresses with the satisfying precision of a well-oiled machine. The rusty pliers, once a mere anomaly, are now revealed as a crucial instrument, used, according to Miss Vance, to open a hidden compartment within the ethyl-red chronometer. Which means, I ventured, that the dormant spark, whatever it is, was likely inside that compartment, and Mr. Thorne discovered it. Precisely, Poirot affirmed, a thoughtful expression on his face. And whoever found him after. He had made this discovery, and took whatever he found. But why no signs of struggle? Why so peaceful an end? Perhaps it was a quick poison, I suggested. Something subtle, administered by someone he trusted, or at least wasn't wary of. A valid hypothesis, mon ami, Poirot acknowledged. It fits the absence of physical violence. But let us consider the psychology. Julian Beaumont wishes to suppress the legacy to protect his family name. Eleanor Vance, as a descendant, feels an injustice must be corrected, perhaps even for personal gain if this spark is valuable. Both have motives, both have connections to the chronometer and Professor Vance's work. Poirot then delved into a detailed reconstruction of Elias Thorne's last known hours, drawing on Mrs. Gable's testimony, Mr. Finch's observations, and the newly uncovered details. Mrs. Gable heard raised voices during the young man's visit. Julian denies any such thing. A lie, perhaps, or a misunderstanding. He also denied seeing the pliers, which Eleanor confirmed were a treasured item. Another potential falsehood. Poirot tapped his fingers on the table. Julian's tell, the slight tremor in his hand. A sign of nerves or guilt? And Eleanor? I pressed. She seemed genuine enough, but she did have that smudge of grease on her hand. Indeed, Poirot said, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. An artist, accustomed to handling paints and brushes, yet a mark of mechanics. Curious, n'est-ce pas? Our conversation continued for a good while, Poirot meticulously dissecting every piece of information, turning it over in his mind like a precious jewel. He outlined his developing theory, not yet ready for a full reveal, but providing tantalizing glimpses into his thought process. He spoke of the inherent conflict between ambition and honor, the weight of family legacies, and the seductive power of a hidden secret. From the elegant café, we moved to an entirely different milieu. A quiet, exclusive private club near Pall Mall, where Poirot had arranged a discreet meeting with a retired professor of mechanical engineering, Professor Armitage, an old acquaintance of his, whom he knew through his investigations. The club, with its leather armchairs, hushed tones, and the scent of old wood and cigars, was a haven of erudition and discretion. Professor Armitage, a man with a shock of white hair and keen, intelligent eyes, listened patiently as Poirot described the ethyl-red chronometer and the phrase, "The true legacy lies not in time, but in the cessation of its passage. Seek the dormant spark." "Ah, Vance," Professor Armitage mused, stroking his beard, a fascinating, if ultimately tragic figure. His work on temporal mechanics was, in retrospect, far ahead of his time. The Royal Society officially discredited him, of course, but there were always whispers among his peers, whispers of a breakthrough he was close to achieving before his downfall. "And the dormant spark," Poirot prompted. Professor Armitage's eyes lit up. "That's it. That's the key phrase." Vance believed that time, at a fundamental level, was a form of energy, and that by isolating and stilling that energy, one could tap into a virtually limitless power source. He wasn't trying to halt time in the literal sense, but to create a localized field where temporal fluctuations could be stabilized and converted. He called it chrono-energy. Chrono-energy, I repeated, a sense of awe washing over me. A new source of power. Potentially infinite power, Captain Hastings, Professor Armitage corrected, his voice hushed. But incredibly dangerous if uncontrolled. His initial experiments were said to be volatile. Sir Graham Beaumont, a more conservative and safety-conscious engineer, opposed him vehemently. Beaumont believed the chronometer was a recipe for disaster, not a source of power. "And the specific components from the Breguet clock?" Poirot asked. "Would they be essential for such a device?" "Absolutely," Armitage nodded. Breguet's escapements were revolutionary for their precision. Vance would have needed the finest, most stable mechanisms to regulate such an experimental field. The hidden compartment would undoubtedly contain the core chrono-regulator, the very heart of the power source. As we left Professor Armitage, the implications of what he had told us were staggering. Elias Thorne had not simply been working on an old clock. He had stumbled upon the secret to a new, potentially world-changing energy source, and someone had stolen it from him. "So, Hastings," Poirot declared, as we stepped out into the damp evening air, "the game is now clear. This is not merely a question of inheritance or family honor. It is a matter of immense power and immense danger, and the little grey cells are now very busy indeed, connecting every thread, every lie, every subtle gesture. The truth, I believe, is now within our grasp." Chapter 7. The Seeds of Doubt. The revelation of chrono-energy had elevated the case from a simple murder to something of global significance. Poirot, energized by this new understanding, spent the next day orchestrating his next moves with the precision of a master chess player. The weather, reflecting the intricate turn of the case, offered a brilliant, crisp autumn day, the air invigorating, the sunlight dappling through the golden leaves of London's trees. Our first stop was a bustling telegraph office near St. Paul's Cathedral, a hub of communication where urgent messages crisscrossed the globe. The rhythmic clatter of the telegraph machines filled the air, a metallic symphony of information exchange. Poirot dictated a terse but specific telegram to a contact in Geneva, making inquiries about historical patents related to temporal mechanics and nascent energy research from the late 19th century. He then dispatched another, equally cryptic, message to Inspector Japp, requesting a specific item be delivered to our flat by late afternoon. "Always one must confirm, Hastings," Poirot explained as we emerged back into the lively street, "to ensure the picture is entirely complete, without any misplaced brush strokes." "And what picture are you painting now, Poirot?" I asked, my curiosity piqued by his mysterious machinations. "The picture of who knew and who profited," he replied enigmatically. "The nature of the dormant spark is now understood. The question remains, who wanted it and who was willing to extinguish a life to possess it?" Poirot then led me to a quiet reading room in the Royal Academy of Sciences, a stark contrast to the earlier cacophony of the telegraph office. Here, amongst rows of scientific journals and academic tomes, he spent a precise hour reviewing papers on early experiments in electromagnetism and the nascent field of quantum physics. He nodded occasionally, murmuring to himself, "Ah, yes, the resonance cascade, the temporal harmonics." I, of course, understood little of it, but recognized the depth of his research. He was seeking to understand the how of the chrono-energy, not just the what. Later that afternoon, Poirot arranged an informal rendezvous in Regent's Park, choosing a secluded bench beneath a magnificent old plane tree, its leaves already turning amber. The park was alive with the gentle sounds of children playing, distant laughter, and the rustle of leaves, a pastoral interlude in our urban pursuit. He had sent separate, seemingly innocuous invitations to both Julian Beaumont and Eleanor Vance, requesting their presence for a final clarification of certain matters. Julian arrived first, impeccably dressed, but with a subtle tension around his eyes. He greeted us with a polite but strained smile. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, what is this urgent matter you wish to discuss?" "Merely to clarify the true nature of Professor Vance's legacy, Mr. Beaumont," Poirot replied, his voice calm. "We now have a rather clearer understanding of the Ethelred chronometer. It was not merely a fantastical clock, was it? It was, in fact, a device to generate a new form of energy, chrono-energy." Julian's composure visibly wavered. His face paled, and his hands, clasped in front of him, tightened. "Nonsense! That's preposterous. A wild, unproven theory. My grandfather, Sir Graham, always maintained it was a dangerous delusion." "Indeed," Poirot said, his eyes unwavering. "And you, Mr. Beaumont, would have a vested interest in maintaining that particular narrative, would you not? Especially if you knew that the dormant spark, the chrono-regulator, was not a delusion, but a very real, very powerful discovery which Mr. Thorne had successfully uncovered." Just then, Eleanor Vance approached, her artist's smock replaced by a smart wool coat. She looked surprised to see Julian there, a flicker of something unreadable passing between them. "Eleanor," Julian said, his voice curt, "Mr. Poirot is talking utter rubbish about grandfather's chrono-energy." Eleanor, however, did not react as Julian had. Her eyes, instead of dismissing Poirot's statement, widened slightly, a subtle hint of understanding dawning. "Chrono-energy," she whispered, a strange mix of awe and fear in her voice. "Elias believed it. He was so excited. He thought it could change the world." Poirot turned to her. "And he confided in you that he had found the dormant spark, the core mechanism, did he not, Mademoiselle Vance? That he had used the rusty pliers, your grandfather's prized possession, to unlock its final compartment?" Eleanor hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. He mentioned he was close, very close. He said he finally had all the pieces, and the pliers had helped him access something incredible. He was going to demonstrate it. To Julian, for sure. He hoped it would clear Professor Vance's name." "And what did you advise him, mademoiselle?" Poirot pressed, his voice gentle but insistent. I urged him to be careful," she stammered. "Such a discovery, so powerful, it could attract the wrong kind of attention." Julian scoffed. "And what kind of attention might that be, Eleanor? Besides the lunacy of believing in such a thing." But his voice lacked its usual conviction, and I noticed his eyes darting between Poirot and Eleanor, a new kind of unease settling upon him. Poirot, observing their every nuance, their evasions and half-truths, seemed to have reached a conclusion. He rose from the bench, brushing an imaginary speck from his trousers. "The pieces are now all assembled, Hastings," he declared, his gaze encompassing both Julian and Eleanor. "The stage is set. Tomorrow the final curtain will rise, and the truth of the case of the rusty pliers will finally be revealed." I looked at the two uneasy individuals before us, then at Poirot, whose face held an expression of profound certainty. I had little doubt that he had already solved the mystery, and that Julian and Eleanor were, in their own ways, at the very heart of it. Chapter 8. The Dormant Spark Awakens. The final act of our drama unfolded in the quiet solemnity of Elias Thorne's study. Poirot had meticulously arranged for all key players to gather there. Inspector Japp, a nervous Mrs. Gable, the old mechanic Mr. Finch, Julian Beaumont, Eleanor Vance, and, of course, myself. The room, still imbued with the scent of old paper and the ghost of Elias Thorne, felt heavy with anticipation. The empty wooden box lay on the desk, the rusty pliers beside it, mute witnesses to the tragedy. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small figure radiating an almost palpable authority. He surveyed the assembled group, his gaze lingering briefly on Julian and Eleanor, whose faces betrayed a mixture of apprehension and forced composure. The early morning light, clear and sharp, streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, "we are here to unravel the truth behind the unfortunate demise of Mr. Elias Thorne. It was not a simple death, but a carefully orchestrated murder, motivated by a powerful secret." He picked up the rusty pliers. "These humble tools, belonging to Professor Alistair Vance, hold the key. They were found not in their usual resting place, the wooden box, but beside it, after having performed their final task, unlocking the hidden compartment of the Ethelred chronometer. Elias Thorne had at last uncovered the dormant spark, a form of inexhaustible energy, chrono-energy." A gasp escaped Mrs. Gable. Julian Beaumont shifted uncomfortably, while Eleanor Vance's eyes remained fixed on Poirot, a strange mixture of fascination and dread in their depths. "Mr. Thorne," Poirot continued, "was a meticulous man. He would have documented his discovery, and this documentation, the key to chrono-energy, was what the killer sought." He then turned to Julian Beaumont. "Mr. Beaumont, you claimed Elias Thorne was deluded. You also denied seeing these pliers. Yet we know Mr. Thorne had, indeed, restored the chronometer and found the spark. Your family, for generations, had sought to suppress this knowledge, believing it too dangerous. You, following in Sir Graham's footsteps, intended to destroy it." Julian bristled. "That's outrageous. I merely wanted to prevent him from making a fool of himself and perhaps damaging our family's reputation." "A convenient excuse for an act of possession," Poirot countered, his voice hardening slightly. "You met with Elias Thorne on the day of his death. You argued with him, the raised voices Mrs. Gable heard. You tried to dissuade him, but Thorne, proud of his achievement, refused to relinquish his discovery. He was about to publish his findings, thereby vindicating his grandfather and exposing the suppression by yours." Poirot then turned to Eleanor. "And you, Mademoiselle Vance, you too had a vested interest. You spoke of correcting an injustice, but also of a great injustice done to your family. You were aware of the immense value of this chrono-energy. You saw the potential, perhaps not for scientific advancement, but for financial gain." Eleanor's composure cracked. Her lower lip trembled. "The scene, as found, revealed no struggle," Poirot stated. "Elias Thorne was a man of habit. He would have offered his visitor tea. A cup, half full, was found on his desk. The poison, a fast-acting, tasteless variant, was administered in that tea. He collapsed shortly after, his death appearing peaceful, almost natural." "Who, then, administered this poison?" Inspector Japp asked, his pen poised. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he looked directly at Julian Beaumont. Julian Beaumont administered the poison. He found Thorne's documentation of the chrono-energy and the device itself. He saw the potential for a vast power, not merely a family secret, but something that could be commercially exploited. He wished to keep it for himself, to control it, just as his grandfather had sought to control Vance's work, but for a different motive. Not safety, but profit. Julian's face went white. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "But he was not alone," Poirot continued, turning his gaze back to Eleanor Vance. "Eleanor Vance, you knew of Julian's intentions. You were privy to the discussions. You, too, were there that day, perhaps not in the room when the poison was administered, but waiting, an accomplice after the fact. You hope to share in the spoils, to profit from the vindication of your grandfather, which would, in your mind, restore the family's fortunes. Eleanor let out a choked sob. He was going to give it all away for free, she cried, tears streaming down her face. He didn't understand the value. Julian and I, we merely wanted to control it, to ensure it wasn't misused, and to finally claim what was rightfully ours. Rightfully yours? Poirot asked, his voice sharp. To kill for it, to suppress it once more, this time for greed? The rusty pliers, mademoiselle, represent the ingenuity of Professor Vance. The empty box represents the stolen genius of Elias Thorne, and the stillness of Elias Thorne represents the terrible price of unchecked ambition. Julian, finally finding his voice, tried to protest, but Japp's constables, on Poirot's subtle signal, stepped forward. The game was truly over. Poirot picked up the empty wooden box, closing its